Hey everybody! We we just got the little, the little music in the background.
Hey, ain't nothing wrong with
Hey,
elevator music.
well, yeah, that's supposed to be hip hop, okay? that's that's that strong Tupac. Um, what's up, family? Hey, Kevin. We are doing an impromptu off code. I am in New Mexico at the Unshaken conference, and I got a text from Pastor Kevin. And he said, "We doing off code." And I said, "Okay,
We got to.
I'm gonna be ready. I'm gonna be ready." How you doing?
I'm good. I mean, it's been a rough week. It's been a rough week. These YouTube streets have been rough. A lot's been going on in I would call the world of evangelicalism. Um, and it's just something that shouldn't be going on. We shouldn't even be having to do this podcast, do this live stream, but here we are. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Here we are. I feel like I'm a co-host, but I'm also gonna be in the audience with my popcorn. I gotta play dual roles at this moment because I'm not sure where you are going. All I know it is that yeah, I got a text and it just told me to arrive. Don't be late. But let's tell everybody what the setup was, what happened, why you have called this emergency meeting of the delegates. And it started a week and a half ago now, a little
Yeah.
while ago.
Yeah.
Um there was an interview that our friend Melissa Doherty did with Allie Beth Stuckey. And in that episode, there were comments made, and it wasn't a lot of comments, it wasn't this huge assertion, but there were comments made about the Black church. So we're going to actually play that clip from that interview so you guys can see exactly what was said.
I've had to kind of take a position where I have to understand that I'm
Yeah.
talking to somebody that actually believes that this is a divine thing that's happening within them.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
It's going to be controversial. And I don't know if you've talked about this because
Yeah.
a lot of the theology, obviously, we see it in all different kinds of churches, all different kinds of places.
Sure.
This seems to be especially prevalent in majority Black churches.
Oh.
There's a lot of prosperity preaching, but a lot of, as you're talking, I'm like, I've heard that a lot. You are divine. You are a queen.
Yeah.
You are, a goddess, something special. And
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you've ever talked about the roots of that or why that is.
It's
but
interesting you bring that up. That is a controversial question, especially today's political climate. But I guarantee there's a lot of people watching that are like, Allie's not wrong, you know? There's something there. And I was reading Kate Bowler's book. Do you know who that is? Yeah. And there's a whole section on this that she talks about with the Black church and the prosperity gospel and all these other theologies that kind of entered into the Black church. I mean, Carlton Pearson is one of them. Carlton Pearson was a Pentecostal Word of Faith preacher, Reverend Ike. And both of them were very off when it came to a lot of their teachings. That's like an origin there in that regard. I haven't looked too much into it, but you're not wrong.
Yeah.
I have friends. I have a friend, in fact, we've talked many times. She's Black and she talks about this a lot on she's in ministry as well on her channel. And that's one thing I asked her. I was like, so what's up with this? Like how does this, how do they square this circle? How do they make it so that, maybe in some of their churches that aren't Black have a different view on these things, but for the Black church is very different. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that you're wrong in that.
A lot of the prosperity preachers that I see, like we played a clip the other day.
Okay. So that is what was said. And I feel like the Black church delegates went wild.
They did.
So, right? So, Smart Christian Channel for a minor, he did a little response video to it and basically agreed. He agreed. He said what these ladies said about Black Christians, and his position was like, yeah, you do see this in a lot of predominantly Black churches, and that I think sparked Pastor Eric Mason from Epiphany Church in Philadelphia, he then made this tweet. And it says, I just watched a clip of two white women saying that the majority of Black churches are prosperity churches and theologically unsound. A Black YouTuber, Corey Minor, that mainly posts critique videos agrees. What are your thoughts? Also give a list of biblically solid Black churches and pastors below. Video response coming. He then did a video response, and then in addition to that, he did another response, bringing on Corey, Isaiah, what's his last name? Robertson, I think, Jerome Gay, and a couple other people. I am forgetting everybody's name.
Damon Richardson.
Thank you. But they did like a 3-hour response video where everybody except for Corey, I feel like, was promoting I want to be fair. But I would say a more Black centric kind of promotion or look. I wouldn't call it like a full on like liberation theology, but just a Black church. I'll say they were very in favor of the Black church.
Yeah, they were
What
Black
was
church.
what was your
They
take?
were there to be apologists for the Black church and not to really deal with what was being said. That was my feeling, because even the way his tweet read is a misrepresentation of what she said. You know, she never said the majority of Black churches are prosperity and have unsound theology. That's not what she said. And then they came back and titled the video that. It's like, that's not what she said. And there's a lot of cases where you understand, even though they watched this clip, they didn't listen. And then they clearly didn't listen to the entire interview, because a lot of their critiques was like, but she did say that. But she did say that. Like, it was clearly that they just took something and ran with it. And I want to get into more. So, okay, why in the world do these guys who we know are very smart, intelligent, work in apologetics, how can they be so wrong, take something and run with it? What's behind this, right?
Yeah.
What's the mindset, the thought, the ideology? What's driving this? Because this is pure nonsense and pure foolishness, and we shouldn't even be having to do this over this 3-minute clip out of this video that was an hour and a half long conversation. And just because two white women said something about the Black church in passing is worth the response video and all of this type of stuff. It's complete nonsense.
Well, I thought that it was interesting that I want to say both of the videos that Mason did, he said, this is not because they're white, but in the original tweet that he did, he said these two white women, have come out. And so then at that point, it makes you wonder, well, can white people not speak about the Black church, even if they're speaking like something that is true, or is it something else? But I have now set us up basically to the point, well, no, then you, April, Trey Chaplin, and Ricky Caldwell did a response video yesterday or the day before. And y'all, oh man, y'all laid it out. And so then something else has happened, to which I'm gonna let you pick it up and run with it. And I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. So we did that response video. And then Isaiah Robertson, who's been he made several videos about April, kind of attacking her because she made a video about this. But then his response video to us was just, we self-hate. It was the same old tired, self-hating Black folks. That's all it was.
Internalized racism.
There was no response to what we were actually saying or arguing, the points we made, or the counterpoints we made to what they were making. It was just, oh, y'all just hate yourself. Because at some point, it's all you got, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, that ain't worth a video. And so there was a comment left on his video that
is that the comment you're talking about, Kevin?
But no, that was his response to me. It was the comment about, yeah.
Put that back up, please, Krista. Sorry, y'all. We in a hotel room. This one might be a little rough, but I want to actually look at that one, Krista. So what Isaiah Robertson said, and now mind you, he's a pastor. He's a pastor in LA. Kevin Briggins, white and self-hating Black people use the same rhetoric against the Black pastors fighting for the abolition of slavery in the 17th and 18th centuries. Repent, they said. Worry about the gospel and not your liberation. They said, nope, sorry, I'll take the gospel and the affirmation that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. I'll take the gospel and the request to see all God's image bearers treated equitably, which is different than equality in this case, fairly and justly. Your version of Christianity would have made the slave masters and segregationists proud, have at it. And you know what? I hate these responses because it never just looks at what does the gospel say? What does the Bible actually say? They always have to throw in like these ad hominem attacks. Oh, you're just white adjacent, or you're a coon, or you're
But
this, that, and the
but
third. And it's like, but what was the real argument?
yeah, and so let me respond to this. I get what he's saying, and I get where he's coming from, but part of that is the problem. It is the idolization of a particular movement, right? It's like people who idolize the civil rights movement, right? So if you're placing your theology, like this is what the Bible teaches as a whole, and this is what Christianity looks like, and you're placing it on the start of the Black church coming out of being mistreated, coming out of the white church separating themselves, starting their own denominations, right? Fighting for civil rights and liberation. Like, if that's your that's what Christianity itself is, and not that was something Christianity rightly applied in a situation, well, then no matter what your situation is, you believe that's what Christianity is supposed to look like. So
All the time.
no matter how free you may be, or no matter how much liberation you achieve, because that's your theology and you believe that's the way Christianity is supposed to look, you will always find an oppression. You will always find a struggle. And that is what they've done. That's what he's done. He thinks he's oppressed right now because his theology and his identity is in being oppressed. And so how does Christianity look if you're not oppressed? So it's not about those Black Christians were wrong back then. It's like, no, but they were particular Christians in a particular time that used Christianity to fight a particular battle. And so instead of doing it that way, they have idolized it. They have shaped their whole theology around it. And no matter how free these Negroes get, they will always claim that they're oppressed. They're going to always claim that they got to fight for liberation. And it's like, nobody's oppressing you. You are not oppressed, right?
But if you don't see it their way, then you are white. If you don't see it their way, then you are an oppressor. But what he is espousing is, if it's not full liberation theology, I'll say it's liberation theology light, even when he defines what the Black church is, which we'll get to in a minute. But I completely agree. Like, you can't have your whole theology be formed around your oppression like post 1865. All you still doing, like, we didn't have the Civil War, we didn't went through Reconstruction, we didn't went through Jim Crow and Black Coats, but now here we are in 2025, and you are still as oppressed as you were in the 17th and 18th century. But you're too blind. Your theology is so focused on your oppression or your liberation that you can't see that most of what is happening within your own Black community is at the hands of other Black people, that you are holding yourself back. It is not the white man with their foot on your neck.
Yeah. And it goes so much into this, because when you make that your theology, I would ask, how does Christianity look when you're not in a situation of being oppressed? What does it look like? Because I don't think they would know, because their theology is totally in tuned into this oppression area, right?
See, I disagree. I think that they would say equity. So because think about it, like, when we are done with the struggle, white people understand their participation in racism. They understand how they always had their foot on Black people's neck. We understand, or the country understands equity. So we have equal outcomes. Black people aren't being plucked off by the police. Wealth disparities are closed. There's equity.
That's not biblical, first of all. There is no biblical mandate or even expectation that every group would have equal outcomes. That's not even, and that doesn't make sense. We've had this discussion before in terms of outcomes, because, and man, this is so frustrating because I try not to be condescending, but a lot is just frustrating because it's stupid. It is so stupid. What about disparities where white people are trailing other groups?
Who cares?
Like, I'm saying, like, understand, like, this idea that all groups come out equal is ridiculous, because groups have different cultures that produce different outcomes.
I was just talking about this today.
You can't
Just talking about it.
you can't expect equal outcomes, and no, justice is not equal outcomes. Justice is treating everyone just. That's what it is. The outcomes are up to God. God determines your increase, decrease, all that stuff. We are called to be just and treat everyone fairly, treat everyone right, right? We're told to help the poor and the oppressed and the orphan and the widow and be generous and all of these types of things we're supposed to do in our lives and do justice. But this idea that we judge our success on being just based on the outcomes that come out of it is completely ridiculous and unbiblical, right? And so, yeah, if their idea of liberation is when Black people achieve equal outcomes to white people as a whole based on some sociological measurement, then yeah, they're gonna always be in this oppression mindset. They're gonna always be caught up in this loop of woe is me. And when you do that, I'm just gonna bring it real. When you do that, you diminish everything God has done for you. You diminish every blessing in your life. You could totally look past that because you're looking over what someone else got and saying, we supposed to have that. Right? It's just enviness, it's ungratefulness, and it's bitterness. That's why they're always bitter. That's why they're always angry. It's insecure. It's looking at what white folks doing, what white folks got, and what white folks thinking about me. And I'll say this too, and this is one of my big sticking points. When you take the gospel and you do this gospel and thing that he did, gospel and, what happens when that and becomes the primary, right? And that's my issue with, I believe, the vast majority of Black churches, and I'm gonna say it, I ain't saying majority Black church, I'm saying most Black churches in America have put the and before gospel. Discipleship and evangelism and the gospel of Jesus is not the forefront of that church. It is social justice and activism. It is political activism, right? It is liberation. It is the Egypt narrative. We're going to be led to the promised land out of slavery and all of this stuff. Jesus, righteousness, holiness, sin, Christ down the cross, defeating sin and death. That is not the majority of these Black churches, right? They have put the and first, right? And so when you put the and first, right, of liberation, of all of these things, and you put that over the gospel, now sin and death is, or Satan and sin is not the enemy you're facing, right? What becomes your enemy? What's oppressing you, or who oppressing you? So white people becomes your enemy. White evangelicals becomes your enemy. Whiteness becomes your enemy, right? Whatever you view as the thing that oppresses, keep you from your liberation, however you view that, that becomes the thing in which you must overcome. That becomes the thing in which you must preach against, stand against. And that is so backwards from a biblical view of what we as Christians are supposed to be doing, speaking out and fighting against and being for. So you can keep fighting for some fake liberation that doesn't exist, or you can do what God has called you to do, preach the gospel to sinners and pull people out of their sin, disciple them to be righteous, holy people and who honor and worship God. That is what you're called to do. And along the way, as Peter affirmed Paul in his gospel, and he says, yes, you go to the Gentiles and we'll go to the Jews. He said, but he asked us to do one thing as we went and did that. Remember the poor. Remember the poor. So if you want to do that, yeah, but don't get away from the main mission, or don't cap for churches or cover for churches who have gone away from the main mission because you don't want to make Black people look bad. because you don't want to make black people look bad in front of white folk, right? And so you cover for these churches that ain't preaching nothing, because they preaching social gospel, and that's what you believe in. They preaching liberation, that's what you believe in. They're preaching go to the ballot box, and that's what you believe in. So you're like, nah, these are good churches. No, they're not. They're not good churches. Look at their congregations. Look at the communities. Look at the black community. Look at the state of the black community. Look how many people are churched in the black community. Look how many churches are in the black community. And then come and tell me, oh, these are good churches. No, they're not. They're not. They don't address sin anymore, because the sin is not the issue anymore. That's not what you got to overcome. You got to overcome the white man. You got to overcome your oppression. You got to get your increase. That is what we're talking about. And you run around here in this black identitarianism and think it's Christian. This is Bible 101. We shouldn't even be here. This is so spiritually immature that we got these grown theologians pushing this mess because they insecure in their feelings and listening to James Cone and all these other stupid folks that don't know nothing about the Bible, know nothing about God, have taken the black community away from the faith that got us here, that got us through slavery, that got us through Jim Crow. And look where we at now. And you worry about what white folks think. And you think we care what white folks think. We don't care. We want to see God glorified. We want to see lives changed. And so we speak the truth no matter who may like it. We speak the truth no matter who it appeals to or who rejects it, because we know the gospel is what has the power to save. Not socialism, not liberation theology, not social gospel. None of that stuff is going to change the hearts of the people. And so that's why we got to do this, because it's just ridiculous. And I hope they watch this. I hope they do. And I hope they got. So I try to be. This just makes I have too much respect for these dudes. I know these dudes are smart. I see their ministries. I see them talk about Black Hebrew Israelites and all this different stuff. I see them break down arguments and contextualize things and show how the faulty argument and all. And then when it comes to race, when it comes to black church, black theology, they just kind of like turn their brains off. I can't make sense of it.
Well, as you may have seen in the comments, I said, I'm just here to usher. I got my white gloves. I'll just be guiding people to their seat. I'll collect your gum. But you ain't lying. You are not lying. And I think this is the part where the rub is so strong. It's because they do contextualize, they do, like proper hermeneutics and exegesis in a lot of areas. But then when it comes to being Black, they can't seem to get one verse in front of the other verse before they call somebody a coon if you disagree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
the reason and everything else, or you a slave master, or you know.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to call this episode "The Cult of Blackness" is because the way it functions, and we never really talk about it. We joke about it, but we don't really talk about it, right? We talk about, we joke about being uninvited from the cookout and all this type of stuff. But there is a real sense in which this thing called Blackness acts as a cult, in terms of, if you don't go along with the company line, you will be uninvited. You will be kicked out. You will be called not Black, right?
But it's not even that you're called not Black. It's all of the other ways in which you are drugged through the mud as well. You know what I mean? Because as soon as, and we'll show one of the other things that you sent me. Krista, can you go to that one comment that he had put up? I'm sorry. I think so. Yeah. Yes. But hold on. I'll give you a cue just a minute. But when we do say no, this might not be correct, or have you considered this? It's like you're saying, it's a cult. Like, you literally are completely excommunicated. People are prohibited from talking to you. Why are you over there talking to that coon? Why are you over there talking to her? Like, why are you talking to him? You cannot. people, they put out warnings against you. I think it was no, I think it was, maybe it was Seiko who sent me the text, and I think I sent it to you, and he was like, Vodi Bakum and Monique Dusan are like bad business for the Black community, or bad
Yeah.
business for the Black church. It's like posters on the back of milk cartons. People
Yeah.
to avoid.
But this is what it does, and this is why I call it a cult, because it has this effect. What does it do to others? It sends the message to others: if you get out of line, then this is going
Yes,
to happen to you. And so
it's gonna
there are
happen to
people
you.
who agree with us, and there are people who send us private messages saying they agree with
Yep.
us, but they won't say it because they're afraid of getting kicked out. They're afraid of not
Yeah.
being invited to the cookout. They're afraid of all of these repercussions that will come if they actually say what they really think, right?
Mhm.
If they actually say, you know what, I've been in Black church a long time, and yeah, I kind of agree with Melissa and Allie Beth. They know what's gonna come their way.
And here's the thing. It would be one thing if it was the culture dragging you, but it's your brothers and sisters. It's those in the church that are dragging you.
And-
I have been called better by the culture, by people who don't know Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. And this is why I sympathize with them somewhat, because they do have such a strong heart for the Black community, and they're trying to reach the Black community, to where sometimes when you do that, you want to be accepted by the Black community, right? And so you are afraid to say the things you know that get you looked at a certain way within the Black community. We know what those things are, right? And so you kind of change your stance, right? You kind of start, you know what, we need to get out here and march. We need to do you start conforming to the things you know that are acceptable to them because you want to reach them, right? And you got a heart for them. And then you start pushing back on things that they don't like. And so to me, it's a certain conformity to reach, but you can't do that a lot of times when you get sucked into these things. You just got to go in and stand on the truth, stand on the gospel, and you can't worry about who accepts you as Black, who doesn't accept. Like you can't worry about that, because what ends up happening is you end up compromising.
Yeah.
And I know they would say they wouldn't feel like they have. As someone who has seen the shift, I would say they have.
Because you used to follow them deep.
Yeah.
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 Okay, let's go to the post, Kristen, please. Okay. So I think this was on your thread that you did with April and them.
No.
Was it?
I think I pulled those one from the actual Allie Beth Stuckey Melissa interview. So she was talking to them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Don't open your mouth about Black churches when it's not a Black person present to give you both knowledge, to help your ignorance. This is some straight James Combe stuff. And I'll explain why in just a minute. Commenting on a certain ethnicity without context or a sense of gaining and understanding is not Christian culture. Just because you have working Wi-Fi doesn't give you authority to open your mouth with mocking a certain ethnicity group. So distasteful on so many levels. Part of, and I think it may be in God of the Oppressed, but white people, and James Cone will clearly tell you, white people aren't allowed to speak. Like, they need to make sure they have consensus from all the Black people in the room before they can talk about reconciling love or reconciliation. They should be taught, and they should understand that they are like babies who have, just learned to walk and talk. They really should be silent on matters that pertain to Black people. And this is what this reminds me of. It's like, don't open your mouth on, don't put your mouth on me. Like, don't say nothing about Black people. But what if what I'm saying is true?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, at what
I get
point
it.
do we deny truth because the truth doesn't match our skin color?
And we're gonna talk about the double standard later. But do Black people sit around and not talk about white people because there's no white person around to give them knowledge and understanding? Like that whole premise is just dumb. Like no one can talk, and even if you have Wi-Fi, and even if you've done the research, you're still not allowed to talk because a black person got to be there to be authoritative, and it just makes no sense. That's why I said we got to call this the cult. This is the
It
cult
is.
of blackness, right? And we got to root this out the church. It has sat unaddressed for way too long. And even though I keep saying we shouldn't be having to talk about this, I'm kind of glad we are. I'm glad Mason tweeted out, I mean, not tweeted, but posted what he posted on Facebook, and that he's taking this and run with it, because I wanted to shed light on this issue, and I want us to keep talking about it. I want everyone talking about it. If you're watching this and you got a content channel, make a video on it. We need people constantly talking about this, because I want them to finally get it. I want them to look in the mirror, because this ain't healthy. And this can't continue. This insecurity theology is what I'm gonna call it from now on, where you're constantly concerned about what white people think, and you're constantly concerned about this blackness, this ethnic idolatry that is blinding people from like the truth. And so, or from being in full, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when Tisby lost his mind, when Jamar Tisby lost his mind and started the
He
whole
did.
Leave Loud movement. You know, the whole Leave Loud, like that was so unbiblical, right? You can't be in full fellowship with others, right? Because you're so stuck in this mindset of identitarianism, right? You're so stuck in this idea of blackness. You can't have full fellowship with others. Even if it's white people you rock with, you're going to always look at them a certain way, because you think you can't fully trust them because they ain't part of the group, right?
Yes.
We can't have this in the church no more. We can't. And so we gotta speak up about this. This is, and I know we're gonna play. I'm gonna put up that comment that was just completely off the chain. But when we
Yes, we
see
can go to
this,
that one.
yeah, when we see this type of language coming from white Christians, we immediately raise the flag and say this is wrong. When white identitarianism and white people started, rooting their faith in their white identity and their white heritage and all this kind of stuff, we immediately wave the flag like, no, this is wrong, this is bad. But then when black people do it, we sit silent as if it's okay. And it's like,
There's a pass.
yeah, but they're two sides of the same coin. And this is what I told Isaiah Robertson. You have adopted the ideology of your oppressor. You've adopted this identity. I know they don't see it. I know they don't see it right now. They are no different than the white supremacist who has rooted his identity in his white identity, right? And then even those people, we like, man, how could those people claim to be Christian at the same time, right? How can the KKK have this white identitarianism and then also be religious, and like it just don't go together? They're doing the same thing. It's the same ideology, just black-faced, right? And so,
He froze. I don't know what happened, but I'll pick it up from there. But it is true. When if white people were to do the exact same thing, all hell would break loose in the church. It would all hell would break loose in the black community. And this is what we see, and this is what Kevin, I think, is, and not I think, I know, is so upset about. And this is what we're all upset about, is the way in which the black church is held, and the way in which black Christians must participate or face the wrath. And Melissa felt a little bit of that. She felt a little, and Allie Beth, and and we pray for them. But this is what happens. We can no longer speak truth. We can't speak truth in love. It's not like they said anything that was out of bounds. It's not like they said anything that was a lie. It's not that like they said anything that wasn't, that people haven't researched or have brought up. I think Pew brought up some information on it. But as soon as you bring it up, you have to meet a certain criteria in order to speak truth. That isn't a biblical standard. We are called to speak truth in love. The word doesn't say speak truth in love only if you share the same skin color. Is Kevin back? I think he's back. There he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Man,
your phone died.
it just said lost connection trying to get you back. I was like, okay, I'm on 5G. I don't know what's going on. But so
I'm
I just
telling
dropped.
you, the squirrels that run your internet, man.
Hey, it's Alabama. You know, it's squirrels out here just running our internet because
It's okay. I've been there. I've been there, done that. But keep going. Keep going. We're gonna pull up the post that you were talking about.
yeah,
I was just
I'm
saying
just saying
that
like
go ahead.
they've adopted the ideology of their oppressor. And they would say that we have, right? Because they formulated so they have formulated their identity around blackness. And so the enemy of blackness is whiteness. And so when we don't align with them, they say, "Oh, you've adopted whiteness. You've gone over to whiteness." But their identity of blackness is really rooted in the same ideology that white supremacy is rooted in. And like I'm talking about like legit white supremacy, not white culture, right? Because when they say whiteness, all they're talking about is white culture. No, I'm talking about legit white supremacy where they were white identitarians. Their identity was in there, the fact that they were white and they viewed others differently who wasn't in
Like a
their
race
white.
essentialism.
Yes. And
Yeah.
they've adopted that mindset and then built the theology around it. And they don't even realize like you have taken the ideology that we opposed, that we were trying to get away from, and you've adopted it as your own, and now you're in it like this is what it means to be black. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Well, first of all, I don't care what it means to be black. I care about what it means to be Christian,
That
right?
part.
Right. And so I don't care what it means to be black. I just care what it means to be Christian, right? And so there's no way these dudes know theology. They know the Bible. There's no way they can believe that the identitarian or the race essentialism that they're holding to is what Christ has called us to. They know this isn't biblical, you know, but I don't know what's making them hold on to it though. I really don't, other than they have put up this framework of good and bad. And good is the struggle and those who led us through the struggle. And bad is those who are oppressing us and who still don't align with us, right?
Mhm.
And that narrative is what is driving everything in them. And so it's one of those things where no matter how much things change, no matter how much we would say white evangelicals change, it doesn't matter how many statements of repentance are put out. It doesn't matter how many efforts of reconciliation are done. It doesn't matter how many conferences are held. They're still never going to be happy. They're never going to be
I think it's
satisfied.
because they in line with the Democrat Party who continues to feed this narrative. But that's just me. But we can look at that Pew Research later. Let's look at the post that you sent.
Okay.
So this is from Bishop James Ross. Pastor, some people misunderstand on purpose. This is proof that we need intentional Black identity formation in the Black church as an intricate part of discipleship. Thank God for your ministry. Isaiah Robertson says facts, all facts. They ain't trying to hide it.
No. And so
There is no hiding. Go ahead.
this comment was on Isaiah Robertson's video response to us, where he just basically said we had internal hatred, self-hatred. And so that's what this bishop is commenting on. And he basically is saying that, you know, we're misunderstanding on purpose, right? And this is and then he tells this is proof we need intentional Black identity formation in the Black church as an intricate part of discipleship. We need Black identity formation as an integral part of discipleship in the church. What kind of foolishness is that? And
So my
so
question is would they say that to every other ethnic group in the church?
and that's why I did. So I took this post and I reworded it and put it on Facebook. And I changed the words from black to white. That's all I changed. And people were outraged. Like, this is horrible. We got to do something about this woke right, this white Christian. That, like, people were just like, this is bad. And then I flipped the script and said, hey, y'all, just so you know, it was really a Black pastor that said that. And it's talking about Black. We did a Black identity formation and all this type of stuff, right? And then it kind of hit everybody because the whole point that I was trying to make was
because they're the same
Mhm.
ideology, so the same coin, and these
Mhm.
brothers are walking in the ideology they're supposed to be hating.
Yes.
It's like, how does the enemy get you to adopt their ideology as your own, and then
Mhm.
and then be proud of it and place your identity in it?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It, yeah. It makes no sense, and I don't know that they can have. I personally don't think that they can have any biblical warrant for that. I don't see any place in scripture where it tells us that we need to be shaping our Black identity, our cultural identity, more than we should be shaping our Christ-like identity, our Christian identity, who we are as brothers and sisters. What does it mean to maintain our unity? What does it mean for my matters of providence, my skin color, the time in which I was born, and all that? That takes a second seat to who I am in Christ and how we walk together in unity. But we can never walk together in unity if the only thing that I'm promoting is my Blackness and my Black identity formation, because they
Yeah,
can't promote their Black identity formation, and we get all up in arms when they promote their white identity formation. So they can't have white identity formation, but I can have Black identity formation. You can't make it make sense.
exactly. No, because it doesn't make sense. And like I said, I want to be we are consistent in our biblical application, right? It doesn't matter if it's white, black. It is, what does the scripture say? How are we called to live with one another? How are we called to treat one another? How are we
Mhm.
called to view one another? Regardless of skin color, if we're one in Christ, how should I view you? Right? Or should I view someone who isn't a Christian but has my same skin color? Should I view them more as my people, more so than a white person who is a Christian, right?
Yes, because you're connected through your oppression.
And that's where this is trash and
Yes.
unbiblical. Unbiblical. There's nothing in the Bible that tells us this, right? They've adopted these extra biblical ideologies, and it's like most things, right? You take these things and you add it to Christianity. And I just want them to realize that that's what they've done. And because these are smart brothers, they deal with cults, they
Yeah.
deal with worldviews all the time. They got to understand that no matter how I can be appreciative of what the Black church did in terms of standing on Christian principles and saying, no, we are all made in the image of God and we should all be
Mhm.
equal at the table, right? Because that's what
Yes.
it's about. I can appreciate that, and at the same time not adopt the model as if that is always my continuous fight, and my theology has to always be built around that particular preaching at that time or teaching at that time, because their fight might not be my fight. It's like
Yeah.
taking a persecuted church, right? I'm pretty sure the church in Iran and the church in China preaches a certain way and teaches a certain thing because they're under constant persecution.
Mhm.
But if you wrap your theology around that and it says that is what preaching and the church has to always look like, you will always find a way to be persecuted because that's all you know. And that's basically what they're doing. All they know is this liberation oppression. And so no matter how much liberation they gain, no matter how much oppression goes away, they don't know anything else because they've adopted that as the biblical faithful way. Right. And that is what I want them to like realize. No, that is a tool to use at a time where oppression is present and to preach against it, but you can't make that the theology of the Bible.
Yeah.
You can't make that the gospel or the purpose or even the purpose of the local church, right? Um, and so that's where I believe that they have, you know, they're missing the mark and they're so off. And this is the thing. I'm saying this because this is not always where they were.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk about this Black identity formation because it lays out exactly how they got here, and it lays out how other people I knew in my life got there. And it's
Yeah.
what this guy is saying we need to go through to get to where they are. But no, we
I,
don't.
because the question is, where does it lead? Where does that road end?
Yeah.
Am I more united? And I don't even want to say more united, but are we able to walk in unity more? Or are we just calling basically white people to understand what black people have gone through?
It
Like
creates,
what is go ahead.
as with all discipleship, it creates more foot soldiers. But the question is, more foot soldiers to do what?
Mhm.
Right? Is it more foot soldiers? Like when I say, discipleship, I'm thinking more foot soldiers to proclaim the gospel, to, go out and to all nations, to raise strong families, to be new leaders in the church, be leaders in their communities, disciple people. Their foot soldiers are activists.
Activists.
It's to be an activist. And so, I don't, I'm trying hard to stay away from the Marxist language, but a lot of this stuff is just designed to make more kind of like Marxist type activist type people. That's all it is, you know. It is to make you see the world through the oppressor oppressed lens, you know. Um, and once you do that, and once you understand your blackness, and once you understand your position and how racist your environment is, then you become awakened. No, you are now woke, and now you can now be an advocate and an activist and all of this type of stuff. And we see where it leads. It leads to
Yeah.
summer. It leads to the summer of 2020. you know, that's where it
Yeah.
leads.
Yeah. No. And it leads to the summer of 2020 with I would say, pastors and preachers who believe this ideology or this way of thinking supporting it, or at least giving excuse, or calling for certain reparations, or like it they may not be out there marching, some may be, but it definitely leads to the excuse for why people do what they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say this: the fruit. If we can say, okay, what's the fruit of it? What does it produce? Look at the churches and the communities. That's the fruit it produces. It doesn't.
Okay.
It don't produce more righteousness. It doesn't produce righteous living because that's not the focal
Because
point of it.
But that's also not the definition of the Black church. And I know we didn't get to the definition and we are almost at time. And I'm so sad because part of Isaiah Robertson's definition of the Black church was, let me see if I even have it in my notes so because we don't have time to play the clip. Um, he said, predominantly there to be a historically Black church, by definition it has to be predominantly Black attendance, Black senior pastoral leadership, doctrine which reflects historic Black Christianity slash Christian orthodoxy, um an agent of liberation and advocacy.
Yes.
And that to me sounds more like Black liberation theology, like the agent of liberation and advocacy, because they're not talking about liberation from sin.
No.
They're not talking about liberation from your addictions. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's liberation from the oppression of your white oppressors, which makes me then wonder, well, where is the conversation of sin in the discipleship,
Is
which
not.
we've already talked about?
Yeah, it's not. And that goes back to his response to me because his claim is that focusing on those things doesn't lead to our earthly liberation, therefore is incomplete. Right. Um, and so that's his yeah. So yeah, I mean you are reading him correctly, and that is exactly where he is. Because he believes that I guess you would say that is a useful tool in
Mhm.
that hands. And without that, we would have still been, you know, not free. But that that we can have a history lesson to show that's not true. Um, but especially since the fact that because they would say that they would claim that this is historic Black theology. This isn't liberation theology and all this type of stuff because liberation theology didn't come in until 1965, right, when James Cone wrote his book. Um, but the idea that we needed this type of liberation mindset. Otherwise, we would have still been in chains. It's just not true. It's just not true. And the black church, while it was very prophetic, it did not look a whole lot different than what we talk about the white church in terms of its preaching, its culture, its expectations of family, its expectations that, you know, preaching against fornication and like just,
Mhm.
just sinful, like righteous living, like sin, like fighting against sin and temptation and all of this type of stuff. They were still preaching that stuff, you
Yeah.
know. It's only when you get out of pocket and the liberation stuff becomes what the church is about. And I believe that is we say, man, why did the black community just crash down after the 60s? Right? What happened?
Because the social justice gospel got
That's my
in,
point.
and we became the hub of social justice.
The culture, the church no longer drove the culture,
Yes.
you know? Um, and the church was no longer the conscience of the community. It changed. It became political. It just became a political hub. I've talked about it before, but I know most people, if you grew up in a white evangelical space, you have never seen a politician in your pulpit. I grew up with it. I grew up with Democrat politicians coming to church during election season and getting the
Oh,
mic,
yeah.
right? It is so intricate and connected because it is viewed as a essential mission of the church, and it started in the civil rights movement. But that's a whole nother conversation that we ain't got time to get into. But
We ain't got time.
if we just taking an honest look at things, say, when did the community start to go down? When did the church change? When did the preaching change? When did the focal point of the church change? It just lines up, right?
Which
And
then makes you look at, when did the culture change? When did the family change? When did
yep,
it
and,
all?
and
Yeah.
yeah, and so something else I wanted to bring up, I didn't even put in the notes.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised. Go ahead.
But it kind of aligns with what Allie Beth Stuckey and Melissa Doherty said, and then the response to it, because the question was it true? So I was in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, and I was with a bunch of old black pastors, and I kind of laid this out to them and told them what was said, and I told them, and then they were getting this pushback, and they were so confused. They're like, "Why are they getting pushback? It's true." I mean, these are like
Mhm,
Kojic pastors, right? These are dudes that are
mhm.
in it, like black pastors and black churches, black denominations. They're like, "Yeah, that's true," right?
Yeah.
um, but we were there to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Moynihan Report. The Moynihan Report was the report that came out in 1965 that called it a national crisis because the black out of wedlock birth rate was at 25%,
Yeah.
and he called it a crisis. And the tragedy is that people didn't listen to him. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons people didn't listen to him, the black community rejected it because how dare he say it? They called him a racist. They called him everything under the sun because he brought attention to a problem. Nobody said, "Is this true?" They just said, "How dare you say it?" And how you say, "Oh my goodness." It was the same argument. You're trying to say there's some pathology in black people, right? That's not what anybody's saying, you know. But what did those words were similarly spoken in the rebuke to Allie Beth and Melissa. It's like, oh, they're trying to say, some pathology or something. It's like it's the
Mhm.
same insecurity that is worried about what white people think and what white people saying that prevents us from making any real change because we're so worried about how we look to somebody, right? If we had taken that man's words and heeded his warnings in 1965 when it was 25%, by 1985 it would not have been 75%, which is what happened, right?
Yep.
And we've been between 70-75% ever since, right? And so when we talk about these issues, the issue ain't liberation. It ain't systemic racism. It ain't
The
none of
issue is
that.
culture.
It's culture,
It's
and it's
culture.
living righteously, and it's
Yeah.
preaching righteousness, and it's holding people accountable within the community. You know, if you
Yeah.
doing that, is doing what Alton is doing down in Fairfield, what they're doing, and Bishop Tommy Quick at CFAD, right? Where they're promoting marriage and they're giving marriage counseling. They're talking to these young men and these young women about what it means to be married and husband and wife and family formation and paying for weddings and marriage counseling for free and all. That is what it is. It ain't marching. That don't do nothing. It's not political advocacy. It is be the good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan was not a political activist. The Good Samaritan took his own action, took his own money, took his own resources, invested himself, and made a difference. That's what you go do. It ain't got nothing to do with being a political activist.
You know, I was talking to somebody today at the Unshaken conference, and something came up about, equity and why don't we see the same outcomes and all of this. And I just had to tell them, not every culture is the same.
Yeah.
And we really need to understand that not all cultures are the same. And while we may not like, and when I say we, some may not like whiteness and white culture, they have not, and whiteness and white culture has its own issues. Let me be clear. But
100%.
there are some issues that they are not struggling with on the level to which we are struggling with them. And we can't look across the fence and say, well, is something wrong with them and that's making us behave this way. We need to look in our own yard and say there is something wrong with our culture that needs to be fixed, and it needs to start in the church. I can't.
Yeah, because when it happens, when it happens in the white community, you know what we say? We blame the churches. We say the church needs to do a better job, right? We say we need to do a better job of discipling the culture. We need to do a better job. It's never just someone else is doing this, therefore we're oppressed and we're the victims. It's like, no, the church, if the culture is going astray, there are cultural forces that can be a part of that. But at the same time, we gotta say, okay, what is the church doing? Because a lot of times, we see these things within the church itself, right? And so it's not just an outside issue. So no matter if it's black, white, no matter the context, the solution is always the same. The issues are always the same. It's just that in one context you're able to say it, in another one you're not, and that's the problem. I want to give this quote. I've given it before. It was in an article I wrote. I found it. Father, who was a big part of the civil rights movement, and I was just kind of researching him, and he's an alpha, and they had a magazine. I think the magazine's still going, called The Sphinx. And so in that magazine from 1965, I found this quote, and it was from a man named Dr. Lionel Newsom. He was a educator. He was a university professor and president. And he said he was going around to these young people, and he was talking to them. And he said, like, every time I talked to him, like, why y'all marching? What are you marching for? And they would say, liberation, freedom, equality, all these types of things. And so he said this quote, and it stood out to me, and I put it in an article I wrote. He said, equality can come through individual efforts. Equality can only come through individual efforts. In order to achieve equality, people must be able to communicate, to understand and appreciate each other, and to give and take. Here it is. One must strive for excellence in every undertaking in order to build self-esteem and respect from others. These are the things that finally lead to equality. Freedom may be granted, but equality must be achieved. That was his point. We got our freedom. The civil rights movement was successful. The question is, what do we do with it? And what are we doing with it? Are we achieving excellence in everything? Do we have a culture that promotes excellence in everything? Right? Are we really trying to build and achieve and reach equality? Or are we sitting here saying equality is not giving to us? That is the difference in the mindset. There can be no one can make you equal. You got to go earn it. You got to go work. You got to go grind. You got to go build it. You are free. We are free. And I hate even equating these things, because this ain't got nothing to do with the gospel. But we're going to talk about if we're going to talk about social outcomes, and if social outcomes dictate whether or not you believe you're oppressed or not, and therefore dictates how you view the gospel and your theology. Now we got to talk about this, right? This shouldn't be a part of it, but it is now all of a sudden. So at the end of the day, you are free. What you do with it and what others do with it, the culture we promote. And some people don't even know what culture is. Culture is the values, the beliefs, and practices of a group of people. So what you believe, what you value, and what you practice determines your outcomes. I don't think there's no way we can look at the Black community and look at what we believe, what we value as a community, what we practice as a community, and then think our outcomes are supposed to be something different than what they are. As I heard one girl say, you were born looking like your daddy, but you die looking like your decisions. And we don't want to be held accountable for our own decisions, right? And we want to believe it's someone else's fault, and we want to build a whole theology around it and then look at other folks sideways. No, if you care about the Black community, you got to get individual effort. Individual people have to make the right decisions and take the right steps if you're going to judge the collective. LeBron James being a billionaire affects me none. Right. Oprah Winfrey being a billionaire affects me none if I don't go out and do the things I need to do, right? And so just like LeBron being a billionaire doesn't affect me, neither does Pookish, Nicola, and Ray Ray now, and being on welfare doesn't affect me, doesn't make me oppressed, just like LeBron being a billionaire doesn't make me a billionaire, right? And so if we can just think about these things using logic, using rationality, and stop getting so caught up in this identity and thinking that because I'm Black, I must believe this. Because I'm Black, I must think this way. And if I don't think this way, or someone doesn't think this way, then they're not Black. I mean, different than Joe Biden that said if you don't even vote for him, you ain't Black. You the same ideology, same mindset.
Same. Just in the church.
Yep.
Just in the church. All right, Kev. Is there any other parting words you would like to leave us with?
Like I say, just reject it. Reject identitarianism. Reject this idea that your Blackness, and just going back to the video, what she's talking about, I've heard this before, like you're Black, you're a God, like this Black love, this Black, this blackity black, and this Black. Stop it. As if you are a Christian, that is not what your identity in. It's not what your pride is in. It's not what your hope is in. Do not place your identity in those things. And I'm not saying don't go out and have a good time and and enjoy the barbecue. It's things I love about our culture and growing up in the South and family reunions and cookouts. And that is great. It ain't my identity though. It's not my identity because man, that's a poor savior.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
I would say to people like Melissa or others who are wanting to, stand for truth regardless of skin color, keep standing. All they got is ad hominem attacks. Keep standing. Don't be swayed to the left, to the right. Don't allow your feet to be moved. Keep standing. Stand 10 toes down. Double down. You a clone or you a this, or you can't say that because you white. Stand 10 toes down. Say it again. Like, what? At the Center for Biblical Unity, we say, speak truth to error. I know the culture says speak truth to power. We speak truth to error, and we will continue to speak truth to error. That is what we're standing on because we stand on the word of God. And people are going to come crazy. They're going to say this, that, and the third about you. And that's all right. Come to a family meeting, get online, tell us about the hard day. It'll be okay. Send us an email. But stand 10 toes down. Don't waver. This is what our culture needs in this moment. This is what the Black community needs, white community, Hispanic, whatever. Regardless of skin color, we need people who are going to stand on truth and who are going to stand on the word of God as their foundation, knowing who we are in Christ first. And so, that's my encouragement.
Man, that do be facts, though.
I'm just saying. I'm trying. I'm just here. All right, y'all. You guys, this was an impromptu off code. We are so grateful for all of you who have watched and have joined us. Please go share this, share it out, share it widely. Don't stand 10 toes down. Yeah, we said what we said. That's okay. And then make sure to like the show, share it, visit us over at the Center for Biblical Unity on our website. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter. We'll send it out every Sunday afternoon. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I think I'm on TikTok, Twitter or X. Follow Kevin. Y'all check out Informed Takes.
Yep. My boy Devin.
Woo, y'all, you will be unburdened when you watch that. You will be completely unburdened. All right, you guys. Let's see. There was a question. Did you find out if Melissa actually gave in to Eric Mason? You know what? I am not at liberty to talk about that, but I will say that I have checked in with Melissa. Melissa's good. Melissa's doing well. She good. And you know, what she addresses and what she doesn't isn't for me to decide, but I will on behalf of the family say pray for her, but know that she good. We ain't let Melissa go out like that. Not today. All right, y'all, have a good one. We'll